up? My name is John Bonjour. I am a comic artist and film enthusiast. I have not drawn any art, but I would like to enthuse about some film. Today we are talking about Daredevil Born Again episodes 5 and 6. That's right, we got a twofer. So I am going to talk about these episodes separately because I think they are different and that does matter. Episode 5 is a bottle episode. It is not, and I feel like this is so important to say because there's this kind of weird running sentiment, a filler episode. The people calling this a filler episode, I genuinely think just straight up don't understand what that means. This isn't empty fluff for no reason just to fill an episode because they need to have a certain number. This is an important part of his story. It is a bottle episode. It is separated from the other main running story, but that doesn't make it filler. That just makes it a side story, and I think that's very different and very important to acknowledge. As far as episode 5 goes, there's not a lot that I don't like about it. I think it's well paced. I think it's well shot. It's fun to see Matt Murdock being Matt Murdock and the Daredevil version of Matt Murdock. I mean, he's not full Daredevil. He doesn't put on the suit in this episode, but he is being the comic book character that we know and love, protecting people, emotionally connecting with people, solving little mysteries, stopping crime. This is the first time I think maybe ever that we've gotten a bank robbery stopped in an MCU movie. Closest we got before that was in Spider-Man Homecoming, where they rob, I suppose it's technically a bank, but it's really just a series of ATMs. So it's kind of fun to see that like classic superhero setup done in a way that is more MCU, a little bit more grounded, which is exactly what we want this to be. This is another continuing example of how they have nailed the grounded MCU, and I mean that in both senses. Also super fun to see Kamala's dad. That's wonderful. I love that. I wonder if we're gonna see Ms. Marvel in this show. I feel like the chances of that just got way higher as some sort of like post-credits thing. I guess Theory Corner for this episode, they talk about that she's in California. Seems like it's a Young Avengers thing, that's my guess. Or I mean, she could also just be in California, but you wouldn't really mention that if it wasn't like a thing. But yeah, aside from that, there's not a lot that I don't like about episode 5. And I don't have a ton to say other than I do want to just challenge the criticism that it's filler in some way. I think it's very important to Matt's story. I think him developing, like seeing that he can be a hero again it's a really important step. Seeing that he can make a difference, not just in legal ways, but in these action situations. He is good under pressure. I also love that stairway fight scene. It's not the same as the other stairway hallway fight scenes, but it's very fun. I like that he has to keep it quiet. The dynamics of that fight are very interesting. I guess if there was going to be a nitpick, it's just that I wish he had put the mask half on instead of all the way on. That doesn't matter. Like, that obviously doesn't, none of that really matters. I just think it would be visually more fun if he had like a bright red, just halfway mask. This is just such a great episode. It was fun to see Kamala's dad trying to like just hype her up from afar. He's adorable. I love him and I'd love to see him in more stuff. Certainly there will be people complaining that Ms. Marvel is involved in this at all because people are bad sometimes, and I think that sure, feel that way if you want to feel that way, but I love that they're doing little things to connect the universe, dropping little character moments, little things where it's like, yeah, Matt Murdock would kind of get involved with all of these different people. He's probably the most in the universe of these characters because everybody else is jetting off to fight some guy or do something. Matt's the only guy who's just kind of hanging around on the streets, so it's fun to see those little connections. And this was just a great episode. I love a good bottle episode. I appreciate that it had the guts to kind of just sit in the story that it wanted to tell. I do a little bit wish, and this will get into some of my thoughts on episode 6 more than anything, I do a little bit wish that we had seen more Muse. Just like toward the end, even having like a side story running where Muse is going about doing his thing, or Fisk is learning about Muse, because I think that would have made the next episode feel a little bit less of a kind of bottle episode of its own kind in a bad way. But it would have been nice to see that kind of come together and tie the two storylines just a little bit. But really, I mean, I get why you would do a bottle episode. I get why you would do this as its own separate thing. And I think for what it is, it's so much fun. It's such an entertaining episode of television that I really don't mind that it doesn't necessarily fit into the broader arc past just some character stuff. Which does bring us to episode 6, the episode that I think I have more interesting things to talk about. Things that I really love about this episode. Daredevil's back, baby. He's here. I got to see my boy. I got to see Daredevil doing Daredevil, and I love to see it. I think visually this looks better than the first episode did. It is still a little bit rubbery and a little bit off, but it didn't take me out quite as much. And when he's being Daredevil, I think it works beautifully. I absolutely love it, and I'm so happy to see that. Also, Kingpin, the fight with him, with Adam, I think is the guy's name. The mirroring of their two storylines, I've always enjoyed that element of the show. Seeing them both dip back into the violent nature, just wonderful. We knew it was coming because the show is called Daredevil, but I think they did just a great job bringing those two stories to a head, making you care about these stories. I think part of my issue that I have with it is just, might not even separate it. I'm feeling that now. I don't even think I'm going to separate these two. I think I'm just going to kind of discuss a little bit. Part of the issue that I do have with the episode is a little bit of the editing feels choppy, especially when there's that fantastic, phenomenal, like my favorite moment of maybe the show, when he finds out that the niece of the White Tiger has been kidnapped and she's missing and we don't know where she is, and he kind of thinks he knows, and he calls the police and he's waiting for the phone to ring. They pick up and you can just see him realizing that there's nothing that's gonna happen. They're not gonna solve it. They're not gonna get there in time. He doesn't trust the system. All of the storylines all collide into this one F it moment. And it's beautiful. And then it cuts to him opening up his like storage thing where he keeps all the suits that we saw from the end of the last episode. And there's a little bit of a rooftop run and a jump, full Daredevil suit reveal. And then we cut to Muse. And there's just it's a little awkward. There's something a little strange about that, a little bit anticlimactic. I really think this moment would be so much stronger if we just had fuck it, cut, go to Muse, sees doing all his business, he hears the clanging, he looks, sees the red light, and sees just Daredevil full booking it right at him. That shot was beautiful. I think the reveal would have been so much stronger if the first time we really saw the Daredevil suit once again in full glory, in full lighting, was when he was just screaming. That little moment where he's doing the fight and he gives back into being Daredevil and he releases this primal scream. It's such a great moment, and I think it would have played so much better if that was our first full look at Daredevil again. Instead of this semi-triumphant, he's back in the suit doing the parkour and all that. That felt like a final swing at the end of a Spider-Man movie, and less like he's on mission, he needs to go, he's got to get to a certain place at a certain time to save somebody he cares about. But that is kind of a nitpick. Generally speaking, I do think that it is such a good episode. I think this show is so good. I think there is something to, the pacing is really solid, the editing is a little bit weird, and I think that's by force, probably, because this is, I'm sure we've all heard that this is like two versions of the show that are kind of cut together. I think for being that, I think it looks a lot better than, say, a Captain America Brave New World did, but I also think it does show in a couple of places. I'm not entirely sure that this is one of them, although it could be, but there are just some moments where things don't necessarily connect into the other thing. Like, you wouldn't inherently write the show to jump in the ways that it does, and I think that shows sometimes, so that is a little bit of a problem. But that being said, it shocks me for me being able to see that, for me being aware of the backstory of all of that happening. It's amazing to me how invested I am in the show and how invested I am in these moments where we get to see Daredevil come back and be full Daredevil. I appreciate that the show has addressed some of the issues that I've had. I love that we're getting Daredevil. I love that we are building this character. For a second, I was a little bit worried that Muse was going to be just a pretty much one and done villain, like he was going to be built up very quickly in this episode, and that's kind of what I was talking about, is that I think that they should have spread out the Muse reveals a little bit so that it's not pretty much this episode we learn who Muse is and also get the first fight with him and Daredevil. That being said, I genuinely was worried that was going to be the only fight between him and Daredevil, and we were going to go on to some kind of Kingpin arc for the last 3 episodes, which it might still kind of shift into. I think because the first and second season are one big story kind of split into 2, I imagine they're saving the Kingpin stuff for most of the second season, and the Muse stuff will be the end of the first season. I guess that's my theory corner. I don't really have any theories at the moment. It is fun to see Kingpin developing his task force of like anti-vigilante cops. I think that's a really interesting just thing to go for. I'm wondering if that's going to be limited to this show or if that's going to be MCU as a whole. Like, is that something Spider-Man's going to be facing down? Is that something we're going to be worrying about with like an Ant-Man? Or is it like a Secret Invasion where he says we're gonna go to war with all the aliens and then nobody ever talks about it literally ever again? Like, kind of hope that it's a bigger, grander thing because it's already spread through Echo, Hawkeye, and now Daredevil. I hope that becomes a thing that's more important to the rest of the MCU. But really, who's to say? We're getting announcements literally today about who the cast is for the Doomsday, and we're already going into Secret Wars that's getting filmed, which is very interesting to me because it does not feel like it doesn't feel like we've built up to that almost at all. I'm okay if it just matters to this show because the show is justifying itself. But this is part of the MCU now, and there's a part of me that hopes that it actually affects the MCU and vice versa. Point being, I am loving Daredevil Born Again. I think it is a phenomenally well done show, especially given the limitations that it's already had. But even outside of that, this is a show that I will highly recommend to people already, and I'm glad to see it. It's character focused, the action is wonderful, some of the CGI is not phenomenal, but generally speaking, visually, it's just a triumph. It looks awesome, it's well lit, it's very dreamy and foggy, no pun intended. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Did you like these episodes? How did you feel about them putting them back to back? What are your thoughts on episodes 5 and 6 of Daredevil, and where do you think we're going? Thank you so much for watching this video and checking out my channel. If you'd like to hear more of my thoughts on movies, comics, TV shows, anything of the sort, hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and comment down below what you'd like me to review next, or do none of that because I am not your dad.